Hello my loves, welcome once more to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing the first book I've read this year. In fact, I started it midway through December, carried me across Christmas, and I ended it in the first week of January. A little bit too much information for you, I know my loves, but I like to be honest about these things. So the first book I read is The Pale Blue Eye by Louis Bayard. This book was recommended and indeed lent to me by my dear brother Mitch. A kind of a Gothic crime novel set in 1830s America, or rather kind of north of New York, really, up along the Hudson to West Point, it's called, which is apparently the oldest occupied military post in America. Didn't know that. In fact, I didn't know anything at all about the setting of this place, so I had to use my imagination, which was quite tricky. But it seemed quite a nice setting for a whodunit, so to speak. The other thing to note, of course, is that this was made into a Netflix film back in 2022, starring Christian Bale and Gillian Anderson and a number of other people. I don't know anything about the film. I'm going to watch it now that I've read the book. I've heard, though, that it's got mixed reviews. And yeah, I've got mixed feelings about the book, actually, but I don't know whether the two are associated in any way. But yeah, if you've seen the film, let me know what you think of it and whether it's worth me perusing. I do like a bit of Christian Bale, though.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
Okay, so what's it all about, my lads? Well, so we're following primarily a retired constable, a New York constable by the name of Gus Landor.
Give me the hat!
No chance.
You
son.
gave it to me as a gift.
You took it by force from me in New York City.
Yes, and it looked better on me in New York City.
And he's kind of convalescing in the hills to the north of New York, near this West Point fort. He spent a sizable part of his career in New York. Perhaps he's got some kind of respiratory disease or something due to the pollution there. And so doctors of the time would say, well, go and get some fresh air and it will do you wonders. So that's what he's done. He went up there with his wife. Unfortunately, this is so mild spoilers here. His wife dies very quickly. They go up there for him to recuperate and she ends up dying herself. They've also got a daughter. But when we meet this chap, he's estranged from his daughter in some way. She's no longer living in the family home and he's just bimbling around the countryside on his own. Kind of, it seems a bit glum, let's put it that way. Anyway, he becomes involved in a crime that's been committed up at West Point. One of the cadets there, so these are cadets training themselves up to be officers potentially. One of these cadets has been found hung. However, the hung body disappears, and when it reappears, the poor chap's heart's been carved out. So it's something devious is going on here, something potentially, well, dare I say it, satanic. Some kind of dark shit is afoot. Gus Landor is enlisted to try to solve this murder as discreetly as possible. So for various political reasons, this West Point is at risk of being nobbled. So they want to keep it on the down low. But yeah, this is a hellish thing. It's never happened before. Potentially cadets have committed suicide in the past, but suicide doesn't involve removing one's own heart. So there's definitely something more than a suicide here, and it's up to Gus to solve it. However, he does not do it single-handedly. He's aided by no less than Edgar Allan Poe, who happens to be a young cadet at West Point. Now, interestingly, this is historically correct. Edgar Allan Poe did indeed attend West Point, although he did fail to become an officer, but that was why he was there initially. I don't know very much about Edgar Allan Poe at all. I've never read any of his works, including Moby Dick. I will read it one day, I'm sure. But his character is really wonderful, really interesting, the way he talks, the way he writes, because they converse with each other in secret, largely. He writes Gus various notes, very long-winded notes about what's going on. So Gus needs an inside man, someone that's in the camp and is able to observe the other cadets and get into places that Gus isn't allowed to be. So yeah, it's interesting using Edgar Allan Poe in this respect. So most of the intel he gets is in the form of these notes and letters, and occasionally they meet up and have conversations. Now, the story itself, I think, is quite intriguing. Of course, we're dealing with quite a dark series of murders here. This isn't your run-of-the-mill slit someone's throat to off them. Something devilish is going on. Potentially, yeah, as I said earlier, satanic in nature. There's various clues along the way that give credence to this theory. But it does weave an interesting path, and we encounter various characters that could potentially be responsible. I found myself thinking, oh, is it this person? Is it this person? I was kind of right in a way, but not for the reasons I thought. And I think you'll find the same if you read it yourself. The two kind of prime suspects that you'll think are responsible probably are, but not in the way you think they are. There's a wonderful twist towards the end that turns the whole thing on its head. And so, yeah, I haven't given anything away there, definitely, but I would say it's definitely worth a read. One thing to note, though, it's very, my edition of it, it's, the text is a little small, and I did struggle getting through it at times, but that was largely due to Edgar Allan Poe's input. Now, his conversation and the written word is very flowery, very poetic, very intelligently written. I don't know much about Edgar Allan Poe's writing, but I assume it's very close to what's written here. I think Bayard's done his homework here. He's probably a fan of Poe's work anyway, but it was so wonderfully written. The whole thing, not just Edgar Allan Poe's input, but Gus Landor, his character, his internal monologue, his musings, a kind of dry wit that permeates the whole of the book, really. He's a really interesting character, and he's certainly been through the mill back in the past, but he's also got a formidable noggin on his shoulders, and at times he's outwitting Edgar Allan Poe, who is comes across as a bit of a big head, really, a bit of an arrogant young slip of a chap. But perhaps this is in keeping with his character from then. I don't know anything about him. But yeah, wonderful characterizations and a nicely woven crime caper, shall we say. Thoroughly entertaining. So yeah, I struggled a little bit with the overly flowery nature of Edgar Allan Poe's passages, pages and pages where he's describing very little. Actually, he's more interested in love and poetry and whatnot. So at times that was annoying. Whenever I came across one of his missives to Landor, I kind of inwardly groaned, but at the same time the writing was so wonderful that I forgave that. And another interesting thing to note is that Gus Landor, he's retired, he's considered an old man in this book, and he's only 43, something like that, or thereabouts, my kind of age. And I know I always call myself an old man, but he really was an old man, or considered an old man there. He felt it in his bones, as do I quite often. But looking back, the average age or the life expectancy of men in the 1830s over in America, and probably pertained to Britain as well, was only around 40 to 50 years old anyway. So he was this character is considered at the end of his life, really. It's quite remarkable to think of that. I know things have changed now, of course, but yeah, if I had lived back then, I would never have made it this far. I can tell you that right now. Okay, so the last thing I'll say, this is a kind of, it's not a brilliant review, apologies. It's already floating away from my memory, having read this book. But the only thing I would say is that the crime itself and the way it's gradually solved is very interesting, but the twist at the end kind of makes a mockery of everything that you've learnt up to that point. It's a really crazy change, a slant on everything. The people who may have done the crime, and it all swaps around. And that, as good as it was, as entertaining as it was very far-fetched, I thought. You'll know what I mean, the kind of dark magic side of things. But there we are. That's my shambolic review there. Apologies. I'm doing it this evening just because tomorrow I know I'm going to be too busy, and I want to get something out to you, a book review. I'm trying to review all the books this year that I read. But if we get the devil down, what am I going to give it out of 5? Now, this is something I've been wondering about. I certainly won't be giving it 5. There were issues with it. At times I felt it dragged slightly. This is the Edgar Allan Poe influence. At other times it was a little far-fetched. Towards the very end, as entertaining as it was, this twist, it kind of makes a mockery of everything you read up to that point, but in a kind of a good way. I was just hoping for a more run-of-the-mill detective, getting to the root of the problem, there being a definite culprit. There is in a way, but not in the way you think it. Anyway, but it was beautifully written. Absolutely wonderfully written. And I read really slowly, and I always scrutinize the writing in a grammatical sense. I'm looking for errors all the time. There's bugger all in this. There's just a couple of little things, but wonderfully written and very well edited, it must be said. I would love to read another of his books in the future. So I'm tiptoeing between 3 and 4 stars. Well, I enjoyed reading it over Christmas. It gave me an atmosphere of the times. There were lots of words there that pertain to those times. I'm familiar with a lot of the unusual language used in Dickensian, in Dickens' works, with a British slang and British vernacular, but it was interesting coming across some of these American terms that were around at that time. I had to look a number of things up, and I learned a great deal. Of course, it's all gone now, but there we are. So there were, for those reasons, I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. Yes, it was a cracking way to begin the year. So yes, I'll have another review for you soon. And yeah, thanks for watching and listening, or whatever you've done with this thing. Give it a thumbs up and all that bollocks if you like. Anyway, I'll be back with you soon with someone else. Who knows what, my loves. Anyway, cheerio.